Welcome to the Talk Healing to Me podcast. Dr. Michael Breus is our guest today, and I am so happy to have this person in studio. We're in LA today, so we're not at home behind Zoom, so this is even more of a treat than usual. Dr. Breus is known, or better known, as the Sleep Doctor.
That's me.
4 times best-selling books. And we're going to talk about one of your new ones today. But
Sure.
The thing that really stands out to me with you is that it's not just one size fits all.
Right.
You know, it's each person is individualized. And I came up with a quote for today, and I think you
awesome.
might appreciate it. It's from Shakespeare.
Oh,
we're going very cultured.
The Bard.
I know. So it says, sleep that soothes away all worries. Sleep that puts each day to rest. Sleep that relieves the weary laborer and heals hurt minds. Sleep, the main course in life's feast and the most nourishing.
I like that.
Yeah, it's nice, isn't it?
The Talk Healing to Me podcast is for informational and educational purposes only and does not constitute medical or professional advice. The views expressed by guests are their own and do not necessarily reflect those of the host or the production team. Always consult your physician or a qualified healthcare provider regarding any questions you have about a medical condition or health objectives. Listening to this podcast does not create a doctor-patient or coach-client relationship.
It's really true. You know, here's the thing about sleep. I talk about it all the time, but I kind of came up with a phrase. I think sleep is the domino of wellness, right? You fix sleep and boom, 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 boom. All these other things start to fall into line. You know, I've been talking with my publisher. I'm like, I think I want to write a book that's just breathe, drink, sleep, right? Because if you get air, water, and sleep right, like everything else is kind of gravy on the taters at that point, right? And so when you start to think about it, sleep is so important in so many different things. It's kind of unbelievable at times.
Agree. And I think it's the foundation that people tend to go to last.
Oh, of course.
Yeah.
I feel like sleep is the shock absorber of people's lives. You know, it's like I'm having a crappy, stressful day. Oh, I'm just going to not sleep. And, you know, when I finally do need to sleep, I'm just going to slam a bunch of alcohol and see what happens, right? It's like, come on, this is a terrible idea.
Totally. And you know what? Most people that come to me with MS or with some other neurological illness,
right?
Usually it's give me the diet, give me the exercise. And that is the last things that I look at.
Yeah.
What do you think about that?
So it's so funny because you couldn't have diet or exercise without sleep. Right. So there's my second book was called The Sleep Doctor's Diet, Lose Weight Through Better Sleep. And it talks about the relationship between sleep and weight gain and weight loss. And bottom line here is there's so much hormonal change that goes on during sleep deprivation. It's almost impossible to lose weight. So when somebody comes and they say, oh, doc, I need to lose some weight, like every diet out there should say, you know, as long as you've got a good, consistent, high quality sleep schedule, this thing's going to work. But if people are wondering why stuff isn't working for them, sleep's a great place to start looking.
I love it. I love it. You know, when people come and they say, oh, how many hours are you supposed to sleep?
Oh, that's, yeah.
Yeah. It can't be one size fits all either, right?
8 hours is a myth. Come on. Like, first of all, let's talk about where that data came from. That's from the 30s or 40s. What they did was they put people in these time chambers and they took away the clocks and they let them sleep as long as they wanted until that kind of 28 days they kept them. I mean, they gave them food and, you know, all that kind of good stuff. And here's what ends up happening. People needed plus or minus 8 hours and 15 minutes. That's what it came down to. From the 40s, okay? Last time I checked, we're in 2022, and we're in a completely different universe. Do you think that sleep from the 40s is like sleep of today? Because I don't. I think sleep has evolved. I think we have evolved as a species, therefore our sleep has evolved, right? So I don't think you can take long ago standards and apply them today and really be as accurate as you need to be. I like your idea. I think sleep needs are individual. Right. One way to categorize your sleep is through something called a chronotype. And we talked in my book and all that kind of good stuff. That helps us understand more about how much sleep we need and when we need to take it. But at the end of the day, you've got to figure out what's right for you.
Exactly.
Because if you don't figure out what's right for you, who cares?
Well, you're just following somebody else's script.
Right.
I took your quiz and it turns out I'm a dolphin. So
I bet you are. I was kind of wondering in my head while we were talking. I'm like, I wonder if she's a dolphin.
So do you want to talk about the different types?
Absolutely. So the book is called The Power of When, and the newest book is called Energize. And we use the same concepts in both books. So it's something called a chronotype. Now, to be fair, you might not have heard of the term chronotype before, but you've probably heard of the local vernacular, which is early bird or night owl, right? So what I did was I looked at that instance hormonally and genetically. It turns out that you don't get to choose if you're an early bird or a night owl. It's in your genes, specifically in an area called your PER3 genome. If it flips in one way, you're a night owl, and it flips in another way, you're an early bird. So we started to know about these things. And by the way, this research was all done in the 70s. We figured out, okay, there's a way to figure this out. So they give them questionnaires, all that kind of good stuff. Fast forward to today, I had a patient who I couldn't fix. She came in and I had the most difficult time with her, an insomnia patient. She finally turned to me. She's like, Dr. Breus, I feel like I'm sleeping in the wrong time zone. I'm like, what do you mean? She said, if I could just go to bed at 2, sleep until 9, and then go to work at 10, she's like, my life would be perfect. I said, well, why don't you do that? And she said, well, I've got a husband and kids and job, career and all these things that, move my time all around. I'm like, well, what if I told you I could change that? Would you do it? And she was like, absolutely. She said, but you may not have to. I'm probably going to get fired at the end of this week. She'd fallen asleep at work. Her work product was really substandard. Like, she knew she was in trouble. So I said, can I call your boss? Sure. So I called her boss and I'm like, hey, bro, here's what I want to do. I want her to come in at 10 and I want her to leave at 6, 7. And we worked it out with the family. He's like, I don't care what you do. I'm firing her at the end of the week. No joke. I was like, no pressure.
Shit.
Right. So it was bad. So we institute the schedule. And when I call him on Friday, he picks up the phone. He says, I got 3 more employees I want you to talk to.
No.
Yeah, it was amazing. And I was like, okay, there's something here. Now, in sleep medicine, there are these things called circadian rhythm disorders, right? There's quite a few of them, actually, but they're kind of rare. And they're not something that you would necessarily see in a woman in her 40s. Right? Like, that's kind of like, you see that kind of thing in college kids, right? Because their circadian rhythms are all moving anyway, and they're all over the place, and they're staying up till late and doing drugs and drinking and all this kind of crazy stuff. 40-year-old woman, you really shouldn't be seeing this. So it's stable lifestyle, like the whole thing. So what we started to do was kind of look through the literature, and then it kind of dawned on me. I'm like, I bet you she is a super duper night owl. Like something that's really, but she's kind of anxious too. And I don't kind of know what that's all about. And so we started digging in and digging in and digging in. Turns out she was a dolphin, right? Or what I call a dolphin. So when we looked at her genetics, it turned out that she had this different kind of genetic makeup where the flipping of the gene was actually an irregularity, which isn't that common, but also not uncommon. Mm-hmm. So now I'm like, holy cow, this is kind of interesting. 10% of the population is a chronic insomniac. I would argue a lot of those people probably have this genetic predisposition. So then we started to say, okay, if we understand these things, how can we help people identify them in a simple way? So I have a quiz. Right? So you go to chronoquiz.com, answer 30 questions, and I kind of figure it out for you. Now, to be fair, it's only as accurate as a 30-question quiz on the internet's going to be. If you really wanted to get deep into it, you could look at your 23andMe data. It's actually, there's a section on there about it. You could talk with your parents. Your parents, it's genetic, so you get it from your parents. Both of my parents were night owls, and I'm a night owl. Mm-hmm. I remember when I was 8 years old, I'd walk into my parents' bedroom at midnight. My dad would be there reading a book. My mom might be watching television. All the lights were on. That was common in our house.
Wow.
Right? I mean, that's just kind of how it was. So here's what's cool about knowing your chronotype. Not only does it tell you when to go to bed and when to wake up, which is kind of interesting in and of itself, but probably not all that interesting, it unlocks everything because it tells you when your hormones are doing different things at different times. I can now honestly, with a high degree of accuracy, tell people what's the best time of day to have sex, eat a cheeseburger, ask their boss for a raise, be creative, you name it. It's crazy. We found over 220 studies that have been done all over the world looking at chronotypes and these different kind of modalities. So what the book, The Power of When, does is it kind of gives you a system to say, all right, which one of these am I? And then what does the research say? It's really quite fascinating.
I love it. Because the bit that I read around, when to be intimate, when to, write a book, the fact that you can actually pinpoint
Dude,
that.
You can program it out.
It's mind-blowing.
Yeah.
Mind-blowing.
Yeah.
Here's what I want to ask you.
Sure. Fire away.
When people have normal sleep interruptions, like if you have a kid, we spoke about earlier on, if there's things that come up in life and, you might be anxious about something, but when you're diagnosed with a chronic illness, there can be a couple of things at play. There can be
100%.
medications.
Yep.
There can be anxiety, and it tends to be, first thing in the morning or last thing at night because people get on with their usual day. And that can play havoc.
Yeah.
Absolute havoc. What would you say to somebody that has a chronic illness, maybe is trying a new medication or not? But has that?
So first, let's just be specific and let's talk about MS because it's an easier one. It's easy for me to identify it that way. So you guys deal with a lot of pain, right? So here's the thing. Pain has a very interesting profile when it comes to sleep. All right. So I worked in a pain center for about 8 years. I did one clinic day a week there because people in pain don't sleep. And I wanted to kind of figure out why. And it's not the obvious reason, right? Because people in pain all the time are used to being in pain all the time. So that isn't the actual thing that seems to be representing the problem for them. It's anxiety. It's anxiety about very specific things too. It's anxiety about when I lie down, is it going to hurt worse or not? Anxiety about in the middle of the night, this isn't for MS patients, but more for low back pain patients. Am I going to tweak my back in the middle of the night and have a massive problem? That type of anxiety is very, very different than, oh, I can't fall asleep anxiety, which, by the way, occurs after that. Because they're like, okay, I finally settled in. Okay, I don't think I'm going to hurt. I think this is okay. Your brain is going 1,000 freaking miles an hour. Your heart rate is jacked to high heaven because you're wondering, am I gonna, you're anticipating, are you going to have pain? So we have to look at anxiety as an entire component of this. And let's be fair, anxiety rules sleep 90% of the time. So what I do with a lot of my patients who do have MS or pain-related conditions, the very first thing we start to try to evaluate is, when do you start getting anxiety and what can you do about it, right? And so we try to standardize things. So as an example, this isn't a good MS example, it's better low back pain example. My wife has 4 torn discs in her back, okay, that are inoperable. So we had to have her in a particular type of bed that stabilized her. So she didn't move around a whole lot, okay? So that's an environmental thing that we could manufacture and have there for her and create a standardization so she doesn't have to worry, am I going to throw my back out every night?
Wow.
Right? So those are the types of things that we have to kind of start to, so we look at the environment, we look at the equipment, we look at all of those different things. And then of course we look at the mindset. Right. So, and, understanding more about what you do and your pillars and how those all things work, mindset's a big one. Right. So when you start to think through that as an idea, it's not as big the pain in and of itself, and it's as big a problem, unless, of course, it's breakthrough pain, which is a whole nother kind of pain. That's the other thing I think a lot of people listening should understand. There's a lot of kinds of pain, right? And a lot of people may not realize how many different types of pain there are that can be effective in the sleep process.
Yeah. And you know what? It's great that you said that. And it's similar with MS as well. Not everyone with MS will have pain.
Right.
Some will, because again,
well, and
there's
also
so many
don't forget,
different types.
numbness is a weird one. Like when you fall asleep on the side that doesn't have great feeling on it, you don't get what's called proprioception. And so those nerves don't feel anything. And so the rest of your musculature doesn't relax as much. And so you don't get into as good a sleep position, what I call a sleep posture.
Yeah.
So, there's all kinds of crazy symptoms. And then, of course, there's the medication, which, I've talked to some people who say, I'd rather have MS than deal with the frickin' medication, right? And so that has got all kinds of side effects. And to be fair, lots of people react differently to that medication. And so we have all kinds of things that we have to start to look at and tackle. But what I will tell you is if you're not getting good sleep, you will feel more side effects. The medication will be less effective and your pain will be greater. As well as your numbness. Right. Right. It's like, but like factually speaking, like if you're looking for something let's say that you feel like you've gotten as far as you can get with your MS, I think you look at sleep.
Yeah.
Right. You might be surprised.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. Let's talk about then, because we know that everybody, has their issues around it, and it could be a partner that's snoring.
Oh God. Yeah.
It could be a kid that wakes up during the night. It
Right,
could
right,
be those thoughts. It might be waking up in the morning and, mentally scanning your body to see if there is numbness, or the same at nighttime as well. So there's all of these things that go on. Let's talk about how to perfect your sleep.
This episode of Talk Healing to Me is sponsored by Clean Boss, the world's most powerful botanical disinfectant and cleaner, created by the one and only Joy Mangano, the legendary inventor behind the Miracle Mop and the woman whose story inspired the movie Joy. And let me just say this, her story saved me. Years ago, at one of my lowest points, sick, uncertain, and starting over, I kept watching that movie on repeat. It reminded me that resilience is real, that you can rise, that there has to be a better way. And that phrase, there has to be a better way, became a guiding light for me. And it's why Clean Boss feels so aligned. Because let's be honest, most so-called green cleaners, they don't kill germs. And the ones that do are loaded with toxins, with fumes and warning labels. But Clean Boss is different. Formulated by Joy herself and powered by nature with a little help from Pitbull. Yes, that Pitbull. Clean Boss is a botanically based disinfectant that kills 99.9% of viruses, germs, and bacteria. And it's safe enough to use on your kitchen counters, your baby's high chair, or literally anywhere in your home. No rinsing required. No scary ingredients. It's powerful, safe, and a perfect example of what this podcast is all about. Smart, everyday decisions that add up to real healing over time. So if you've ever found yourself thinking, there has to be a better way, this is it. Check it out at getcleanboss.com/Karen, because healing starts with the small things, and Clean Boss makes those things count.
Well, so here's the deal is I would argue, number one, wake up at the same time every single day. Okay, based on your chronotype. And I'm being very, very specific for a reason. We've had over 1.5 million people take the quiz at this point. We've gotten a tremendous amount of feedback on this. I can without a doubt say if you wake up the same time 7 days a week, not 5 days a week, I'm talking about the weekends too, your entire circadian system will go back online and lock and load. Now, where will it lock and load? Based on your chronotype, right? So if it turns out genetically you're an early bird, you'll go back there. For you as a dolphin, this is critical, because for some of my dolphin patients, once we can get them to lock into a good sleep schedule, their true chronotype comes out, and they don't. And what was ruling their other one was anxiety in a lot of different ways about sleep, about pain, about all kinds of different stuff.
Yeah, pretty. Because I mean, I work in like 24 different countries and different time zones.
Good Lord.
So I know. So some evenings I'm working really late, and then there's
Yeah.
others where I'm like in bed by 9. But I wake up at 7:04 every morning.
Perfect. Yeah. I mean, I'm a 613 guy, so like I know exactly where you're at. So like that's perfect. So notice the variability in your bedtime can be there, but the wake up time is the anchor.
Mhm.
There's really two reasons. One is when you open up your eyes and sunlight hits your eyes, it turns off the melatonin faucet in your brain. Here's the part that nobody really thinks about. It sets a timer for melatonin to turn back on about 14 hours later. Right?
Wow.
So here's what's interesting. You're waking up at 6:04, 6:04, 6:04, right?
7:04.
Sorry, 7:04, 7:04, 7:04. So 14 hours later, that's click, 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 9 o'clock.
Yeah.
Then your melatonin's going to turn back on at 9 o'clock. But if you sleep in until 9 o'clock, guess what? Your melatonin, your brain can't tell time. That's a funny thing. People didn't know that. Yeah, your brain can't tell time. And so 14 hours later is 2 hours later. And so your melatonin's going off at 10 p.m. No wonder you're up.
I know. Do you know what? You brought up something in the book as well around, in Ireland, we call it the Sunday night fear.
Oh, yeah. Sunday night insomnia.
Yeah. You were talking about, is it social tiredness? Was that the
Social
phrase that you
jet
said?
lag.
Social jet lag. Talk to us a little bit about that.
Yeah,
It's
so stay up
fascinating.
late on Friday, sleep in on Saturday, stay up late on Saturday, sleep in on Sunday. This is why Mondays suck. Okay, because what does your body want to do? It only takes 2 nights in a row and you're on to the next mood. So that's part of the problem is you kind of have to really be pretty stable, at least in terms of your wake up time. So step number 1, same wake up time, 7 days a week. If you can by your chronotype, it's going to work even better. Mm-hmm. Step number 2 has to do with caffeine. All right. So let's be fair. Caffeine is arguably the biggest insulter of sleep out there. You know, more people use caffeine on this earth than any other single substance. But here's the thing, people don't know how long it stays in the body. So caffeine has a half-life of between 6 and 8 hours. And this depends upon how fast of a metabolizer you are. As you get older, I'm 54 years old, like your metabolism starts to slow down, which means caffeine stays longer. Half-life means half is still there. So that's a problem. So if you have 3 cups of coffee and you stop at 2 o'clock, let's say, 8 hours later, well, about a cup and a half is still floating around inside your brain. That's not going to be helpful for a dolphin, right? A person who may have an irregular sleep schedule. So the big thing we tell people to do is look, at very minimum, stop caffeine by 2 p.m. Mm-hmm. Step number 3 has to do with alcohol. There's a really big difference between going to sleep and passing out. Okay. So we don't like the passing out. We like the going to sleep, but I like scotch. I'm sorry. I just do. So, you know, what am I going to do with myself? So we've created a kind of a way that you can still enjoy your adult beverage without messing up your sleep. So you have one drink. So let's say you're having a dinner and you have a glass of wine. So let's say it's 6:30 at night. Have one glass of wine. By the way, it takes the average human 1 hour to digest one alcoholic beverage. So take one glass of wine at 6:30, maybe have your second at 7 o'clock, right? And then you're done by 7:30. You've had 2 glasses of wine. You need to wait at least 2 hours after the ingestion of that last glass of wine in order for it to at least be almost all out of your system. I would argue add 2 glasses of water in there because remember, alcohol is a diuretic. Once you break the seal, you're peeing all night. You've got to have enough hydration left in your system for sleep to work, right? A lot of people don't know sleep in and of itself is a dehydrative event. You lose almost a full liter of water out of you just from the humidity in your breath. So I'm telling people all the time, you don't want to load up on fluids because it's going to make you pee all night, but at the same time, you can't go to bed dehydrated. It's not going to work. So having a nice steady stream of hydration throughout the daytime is going to work. With alcohol, since it's going to be peeing out so quick, that's why I want you to get some fluid back in you. It works pretty well. Step number 4 is exercise every day, but don't exercise within 4 hours of bed. Body heat getting too high, just not going to be able to fall asleep. Body sleeps better in the cool for sure. And then my last step is usually what I call the 3-15. So you wake up in the morning, take 15 deep breaths, spend 15 minutes in the sun, and drink 15 ounces of water.
I love that.
Good to go. And it's all free.
Exactly. Exactly. So brilliant. There's a few things I want to pick up on what you just said. And
Please.
it's great. Thank you for sharing that. Peeing.
Yeah.
And peeing during the night. So a lot of people with MS can have bladder issues. Not all, but some of them can. And may find themselves peeing once, maybe twice a night. I know it can sometimes be hard to avoid. And I've worked with some people to retrain and you know, maybe go a little bit less than they used to. Talk to me about what you should and shouldn't do if you need to pee during the night.
Yeah. So here's the deal. First of all, most people, so the number one question that I actually get asked other than what bed should I buy is, what do I do if I wake up at 2 o'clock in the morning and can't go back to sleep? So this is very relevant to that question. So what happens when people wake up at 2 o'clock in the morning? The very first thing they say to themselves, I wonder if I have to pee. Now, here's the bottom line. If you don't have to pee, don't pee. I'm going to explain why in just a second. Well, actually, I'll do it right now. So at the bottom line here is you need a heart rate of 60 or below to get back into an unconscious state. When you go from a lying position to a seated position to a standing position, walk across the room, urinate, and come back, what do you think happens to your heart rate? It's through the roof, right? So then you have 2 problems on your hand. You got to get back to sleep and you got to lower your heart rate. Okay, so that's not going to be a valuable thing for you to do if you don't really have to pee. To be clear, if you got to go, please go to the damn bathroom, okay? Like, I'm not saying hold it all night, but what I am saying is a lot of people will tell me, they wake up and they say, I guess I'll try. Please don't try, lie down. The second thing people do that kind of messes everything up is they look at the clock.
Or their phone, which is worse.
Yeah. Well, they're both pretty bad, to be fair, because here's what's going on. They instantly do the mental math and they say, oh, shit, it's 3 o'clock in the morning. I have to get up at 5:30. Sleep, sleep, sleep. And they try to sleep. Okay. You know, sleep is a lot like love. The less you look for it, the more it shows up. You know?
I love that.
Right? So it's like, you know, when you're out there looking for that perfect person, you can never find them. And then the second you stop looking so damn hard, whoop, they wander right into your life. You can't try to sleep. Sleep is a process that comes upon you, right? But you can allow yourself to have the natural sleep process take over, right? So what I tell people is, and by the way, I can't get them to stop looking at the damn clock. It's impossible. Yeah. So I say, when you look at the clock, there's a couple things I want you to know and understand. So number one, there's data out now about non-sleep deep rest. Okay, so this is a whole new area of study. A lot of people don't know about it, but it's very interesting. Lying in a bed, in the dark, in silence is actually rejuvenative, right? Now, it's not as good as sleep. That's not that bad. If you lie in a non-sleep deep rest state for an hour, it's worth about, I'd say, 20 minutes of sleep. Okay, so here's the thing. A lot of people wake up at 2 and never fall back asleep, and they're anxious about it, and they're feeling like crap. Relax. Okay, that's number one. Non-sleep deep rest can be helpful. So if you got to lie in bed for another 3 hours, that's okay. You got another hour of sleep, which, by the way, if I told you you could get another hour of sleep, you'd be thrilled, right? So relax. That's number one. Number two is we got to get your heart rate back below 60 to get you into that unconscious state. So we use something called 4-7-8 breathing, right? Andrew Weil came up with it for the Navy SEALs. Very interesting technique. So I don't know if you know, but if you're a SEAL and you're a sniper and you're shooting downrange, if your heart rate is above 60, it can change the trajectory of the bullet. Right. So they had to get those guys and gals to get their heart rate down low. So what it is, it's a very interesting technique. Breathe in for a count of 4, hold for a count of 7, out for a count of 8. So the science on it's kind of interesting. So here's the thing. Most people are very shallow breathers, right? And so what happens is carbon dioxide weighs more than oxygen and it stays bound in the bottom of your lung. So that 4 is to breathe in and get real fresh air in, like big, deep breath in. But by the way, you're not going and trying to suck it all in, right? It's just a nice, big, deep breath in a calm manner. Holding it for 7 allows the oxygen to exchange, and then expelling it for 8, which is longer, right? Helps dump out that excess carbon dioxide. When fresh oxygen comes in, your heart doesn't have to work so much because you got more air in there now, right? More oxygen.
Yeah.
So your heart rate starts to dump quickly. In 5 or 6 cycles of 4-7-8 breathing, you should be, if you're capable, at 60 or below. And then the natural sleep process can kind of take over.
I love it. It's like the adult version of counting sheep.
Yeah, pretty much. Well, I have one of those actually. So for people who have to have something to distract their mind, try counting backwards from 300 by threes.
Oh.
It's mathematically so complicated you can't think of anything else, and it's so damn boring. You're out like a light.
Wow. I'm nearly starting to do it in my head.
I know, it's hard.
Okay.
It's hard. You can't find the pattern.
Good.
Yeah, it's a mess.
Okay, I must remember that. Thank you for that. That's great. One of the other things you mentioned then was around exercise. One of the things
Yep, that's a biggie for you guys.
Yeah, it really is. And you know what? It frustrates me in a way because I see a lot of people, and I don't want to badmouth anyone because there's so much great work being done out there, but there's a lot of people that have people with MS, going really hard and doing intense exercises
That's
and
a
building
bad
strength.
idea.
And for me, I think that is super damaging.
Yeah.
And, you mentioned, restful time, restorative time in my program is really, really important.
Yeah.
Like where the body's doing nothing. Now, I don't ever recommend people to do it in the dark. I just didn't think about it, to be honest, but now I will. So I'm going to add that in with your permission.
It's not my data, by the way. If you go to PubMed and you look up non-sleep deep rest, you'll find that there's real data on it. It's interesting.
Okay, amazing. Thank you.
Sure.
But I feel really passionately about, and I like to call it movement rather than exercise. So it's not intense.
I mean, that's what my 4th book is really all about. It's about movement as opposed to exercise, right? And so here's the thing that we learned is, and I guess this applies in MS as well. I guess this might have been where you were going with this, was that you don't have to exercise to have energy, right? A lot of people think that, and movement is actually what provides energy. Well, let me back up. Lack of friction is what we're really looking for here. Right. And so when you're gunning it hard in a cycling class and you're trying to reach your personal, that's a lot of friction.
Yeah.
Right. Because you're pushing against everything. But when you can flow, right, there's less friction. And that's really how the body is going to work at its best, I would argue. And so when you look at something like MS, a lot of things we look at is restriction of movement, right? Because of numbness, because of pain, because of all of these things. But what the 4th book, which was called Energize, How to Go from Dragging Ass to Kicking It in 30 Days, with my co-author, Stacey Griffith, who's an amazing instructor at Soul Cycle, the indoor bicycle class. What we see in MS types of patients is that movement turns out to be far more important than exercise, right? Because it's kind of, Stacey always goes like lubing the joints is how she puts it, right? I'm like, I don't know if I like that term, but it's really about like sitting is the new smoking, right? And so at the end of the day, keeping that whole flow moving, not getting stagnant, because here's what happens. When you sit too long, your body swells. When your body swells with inflammation based on your diet, based on other movement, based on maybe chronic fatigue and illness, it hurts and it gets stiff. And that's when you start to have real problems. And if you've got MS on top of that, come on. If I had MS or I had somebody in my family that had MS, I think I would be having them on a movement schedule very similar to what was in Energize, which is we have 5 different types of movements that people do for 5 minutes at 5 different times of the day. That I think can kind of spread it out and help people, depending upon obviously your mobility and how bad of a situation you have or how good of a situation you have. I think it could be valuable.
Yeah, for sure. And I think, again, going back to the personalized approach, that again, it's not one size fits all.
Oh, hell no.
Yeah, yeah. I give a
It just
TEDx
doesn't
talk
work.
about that,
Oh,
about
did you?
specifically. It can't. Like, how can the
doesn't
same
make
treatment for
sense.
so many millions of people in the world be,
Effective.
actually effective for
Well,
everybody?
it's really more about profit than it is about effectiveness, right? And so when you start to look at the treatments, right, I don't believe it costs as much money as it seems to, but it seems to cost quite a bit of money to develop new pharmaceutical interventions, behavioral interventions, things of that nature. And so, of course, the charge to them for them is exorbitant. And I kind of find it hard to believe, right, that we can't figure this stuff out in a cheaper way for people, because like access to treatment, while I understand there's a motive for profit, there's got to be a universe where profit isn't ruling the day. Like, I mean, I think, I just heard Mark Cuban is starting a company called Generic Plus. And so you can buy the drug that you need for the actual cost of the manufacturing plus 15%. And it could save Medicare here in the United States billions of dollars. Like, this is an idea that should have happened years ago. So I'm very curious to see what happens for MS treatments moving forward, and hopefully we continue to see some research. I saw that there was a really interesting study on electrical stimulation that was being done for MS in some really positive ways.
Yeah, I've seen some of that research coming out. It's very, very enticing indeed. One of the things that people come to me, and the word that pops up all the time is endurance and being able to get through the day. If people
Yeah.
are dealing with chronic fatigue, how do you know the difference between chronic fatigue, tiredness, and all of the different things? Is it
It's-
normal, or is
well,
it actually,
Here's what I'll
part of
tell you.
illness?
It's hard to tell the difference.
Mm.
But in those situations, I like to nap.
Mm. Yeah.
Like especially for my MS patients, like, to be clear, there's nothing wrong with taking a damn nap, right? But let's be smart about it. Don't take a 60-minute nap, because you're going to feel like crap afterwards. Take a short nap before stage 3-4 kicks in, so you don't feel like shit when you wake up from the nap. So I tell people, take a 15-20-minute time out. If you fall asleep, great. If you don't, it's fine too, right? Because again, that non-sleep deep rest, I think, can be very helpful for people. Just getting out of the fray of the anxiety of all the craziness that goes on in life. So for people who are having a hard time getting through a day, I like to prescribe naps. I think that can be super duper helpful for them, especially strategically timed naps. That can be helpful as well.
Brilliant. Anything around, does it have to be in the dark or in bed? Can it be on a couch?
The biggest thing is safety. So I'm always worried about people taking naps during the daytime, because a lot of times they'll be like, oh, I'm at work, what can I do? And so some people might go to their car and take a nap. I'm not a big fan of that unless you have a partner. So if your partner is willing to like have their lunch while you take a nap in the car, that's fine. I'm totally. Also, let somebody know, hey, I'm going to take a nap. I've got my eye shades, my earplugs, I'm going to go do this. I'm going to be in that room over there. Please come check on me in half an hour or something like that. Like, that's important, because here's the thing. Nobody falls asleep when it's not safe. Nobody. Ever. If you
Very
think about it,
interesting. Yeah.
sleep is all about safety. If you don't feel safe, there's no universe where you're going to keep your eyes closed. Right?
Yeah.
So if you want to take a nap, make sure you're safe. I bring a little kit. I have the sleep kit that you get on the airplane. I make my own, by the way. Of course I do. I'm the sleep doctor, but I recommend that people bring a nap kit, or just keep it in your drawer at work. And by the way, tell your boss, right?
Yeah.
Hey, you know what? I've got an hour for lunch, 25 minutes of I'm going to take a nap, and then 25 minutes I'm going to eat.
I love that. When I was about 19, I used to work in insurance brokers in the summer, a friend of my dad's. And it was right around the corner from a beautiful park called the RV Gardens in Dublin.
Oh, nice.
And I used to go and have a sleep under a tree, set my alarm.
Sounds amazing.
Like in the sun, a little bit of shade.
That's
it
perfect.
was perfect. And I still
Yeah.
remember to this day, it was
Yeah.
all those years ago.
That's awesome.
Best naps though.
Ever.
Yeah, really, really great naps.
Yeah.
Speaking of bedtime and, being safe in the right environment, is there any merit in having a particular, the same routine every single night? Any particular things that you would prescribe?
Ready to turn inspiration into transformation? Join the Inner Circle Book Club, where we explore life-changing books that spark energy, confidence, and joy. Each month we read, reflect, and challenge ourselves with exclusive coaching, powerful insights, and engaging discussions. It's more than just reading, it's about real change. Join us with the link in the show notes and get ready to start your next chapter today. I look forward to seeing you on the other side. Let's grow together.
I would. So what I do is I break down the last hour before bed into what I call the power down hour, right? So kind of like your body's a computer or whatever. So first 20 minutes, just shit you got to do. So even if you got to do an email, right? Like, but kind of relax a little bit. 20 minutes for hygiene, and then 20 minutes for some form of meditation, relaxation, prayer, read a book, have sex. I don't care what you do, but you got to have enough runway to land the plane. And a lot of people don't think about that. They just like watch TV until their head starts bobbing. It's not really effective, because what happens is when you stand up, walk across the room, brush your teeth, wash your face, and then get into bed, boom, you're awake. And you've also probably dumped your sleep drive a little bit, because you've probably fallen asleep for a half an hour, 45 minutes. So it's going to make the whole situation much worse. So I think consistency at night, having a routine, it's going to be very, very helpful. I would say 99% of the time. Sometimes it's hard to institute those. So like if you have kids and you want to get them, when they're itty bitties, they have a routine. And guess what? It works. But once they start to get a little bit older, if they fall out of that routine, that's when you start to see kids having sleep problems.
Yeah. Speaking of kids, my daughter's just turned 18. So she's finished school.
Nice.
She's starting to come in later on, though.
Bet she is.
And I'm a really light sleeper. How do you deal with that? Sorry, that's a personal question now, but I'm going to get it in.
No. So here's what I can tell you is I never slept the same the day after my son was born. Oh, it's just how it works. Welcome to being a parent. I don't think that radar ever really turns off, nor do I honestly think you want it to.
No, you're right.
To be fair.
Yeah.
But I can tell you what I did is I explained it to my son and I explained it to my daughter, and then they don't show up at home at 2:00 in the morning because they know I'm going to be waiting.
Yeah, or 3.
Right, exactly. I mean, but they'll let me know like, hey, Dad, it's going to be a late night. We're going out to a concert tonight. I'm okay. And I'll actually be able to fall asleep if I know something like that is going on and I know where they are. Or I just say, hey, text me and let me know you're on your way home, something along those lines. But that will be disruptive to my sleep for sure. Right. And let's be clear about something. I don't have perfect sleep. Okay. Nobody does. Right. If something's going on with my daughter, I don't sleep well. That's just how it works. I'm sorry.
Thanks for making me feel normal.
Yeah.
I appreciate that. 100%. I have a couple of questions from listeners.
Yeah.
One of them was, how do you deal with a husband that snores?
Yeah. So it's an issue, right? So here's the thing. Number one, they have to recognize that they snore, which is a big problem, because most guys say, not my problem. I can't hear it. It's your problem, right? And so let's be fair. If you sleep next to a snoring bed partner, you lose almost an hour of sleep a night. There's plenty of data to support this statement. So they are affecting you for sure. Number two, I want to be clear about something. You need to check and see if they have sleep apnea. So a lot of people who snore actually stop breathing in their sleep. And when you stop breathing in your sleep, that's pretty deadly. We kind of like our patients to breathe, generally speaking. That's called sleep apnea. There are treatments for it that are very effective. But let's say you don't have sleep apnea. You just have loud as a freight train person lying next to you. So number one, weight loss. Interestingly enough, about 5% of body weight loss will give you about 20 to 25 decibels lower. So it's kind of cool. So a 200-pound man needs to lose 10 pounds, and that snore is going to go down by about 20 dBs. That could change the whole landscape right there, right? Number two, people don't know this, but sound is a matter wave. So if somebody's snoring at you, it's a lot louder than if they're snoring away from you. So one of the things I tell people to do is create a pillow wall in between them and their bed partner. Let that sound bounce back into their face for a while. They'll turn over and face in the opposite direction so that the sound doesn't, and then you're all the better. Number three, you can get internal or external nasal dilators. So let me explain why people snore. So if you've ever been out in the garden and you stick your thumb over the hose and the water squirts faster, now pretend your nose is the hose. So anything that makes the hose pinch or more narrow makes air move quicker. When air moves quicker, it causes a vibration, which causes a cadence, which causes the snore. The only way to fix snoring is to make the pipe bigger. Okay, so the breathe right strips that go across the nose, sometimes they work. To be honest with you, I have oily skin. They kind of migrate. I've had them like cross my eye. Like it's a mess.
You should try fake eyelashes at night.
I can't even imagine. That would suck, right? So I use something that's an internal nasal dilator. It's called Mute, M-U-T-E, like mute the snoring. And after about, I'd say 2 or 3 minutes. I don't feel it in there. It's a piece of plastic that goes up into the nostrils and keeps them open. By the way, I also use it when I cycle, and I actually cycle a lot better because I have more air going in. So it's a performance tool as well. You can get them at Walgreens for $14. So it's like, yeah, so it's like, it's pretty laid back. To be clear, none of the sprays or the gargles have any efficacy whatsoever. They're all a bunch of bullshit. So stay away from those. And in some cases, I've seen people actually get worse because of that. There are mouth guards for snoring. I do not recommend the old boil and bite that are out there. I recommend you go to a dentist. And get a proper guard, because you might also be grinding your teeth. You also want to be careful because some of those boil and bites can cause tooth movement or jaw problems, like TMJ, things like that. To be clear, fixing your snoring, getting TMJ is not a good idea, right? So really think through that whole area can be kind of sensitive. So you want to be careful with that. There are also things that keep your tongue forward in the middle of the night. That can be helpful as well. Believe it or not, there are tongue surgeries. There are snoring surgeries out there. Oh yeah. I've got a buddy that's an ENT surgeon at UCLA. He's one of the best in the world at robotics. And all he does is sleep apnea surgeries now.
Wow.
It's cool stuff.
Because it can have such an effect on marriages, relationships, everything.
And again, if somebody has sleep apnea, it can save your life.
Yeah. Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
So snoring, you got to be careful about. I've got a snoring problem, but it's not me. It's my bulldogs.
Of course, your 2 doggies.
My bulldogs. Yeah.
Very cute.
So I have an 11-year-old and a 1-year-old. And the 11-year-old thinks it's the smartest thing in the universe to walk up the bed in the middle of the night and put his head on my pillow. Every night.
Oh, screw that.
The baby, he's fine. So we're having issues, but I think I'm going to win.
See, I'd just be like, get out of the bedroom. I'd be too selfish for that. No way. I have one more question then, and then we're going to do the quick fire round.
Okay.
So the question is, and this is an actual client, she wakes up sweating during the night and wonders, is it normal? Is there something she can do?
So it's called hyperhidrosis, and it's not uncommon. It could be a sign of early menopause, or she could be in menopause, or it could be this idea of hyperhidrosis. Also, by the way, people can wake up with a sweat when they have very mild fevers, early stage HIV. There's a whole host of different things. So there's some neurologic things. And by the way, some medications can cause this as well. Yeah. So if you can nail down kind of where it's coming from, there are actually some interesting solutions on the market. If it is hyperhidrosis, believe it or not, there's a pharmaceutical, there's a pill that people can take for that. But I'm not the biggest pill fan. There's actually chilling technology. So there's something called the chili pad. It's a pad that goes underneath your sheet, and it's got a tube with water that goes through it, and the water can be hot or the water can be cold. So it's awesome. Like I have one on my bed. I love it. So it's great. So in the summertime, you can cool yourself right down or warm yourself right up.
I love that. I always wanted a water bed. Maybe that's like a version of it.
It's kind of like a version of a water bed.
Yeah, nice.
Probably a better one.
Yeah, it probably is, because then you're not
Although I got to be honest with you, water beds back in the day, that was perfect, right? Because they would mold to your body. Right, you could get them firm or soft. Like you could really do a lot with a waterbed. Yeah, the 70s kind of blew it for waterbeds.
Yeah,
I think
they did. I'm sure there was accidents.
I can't even imagine.
You've been so generous in your answers. It's really brilliant. We're going to go to the quick fire round. You ready? Okay. So we've got 10 questions. If you followed your childhood dream, what would you be doing now?
Oh, my childhood dream. What would I be doing now? Probably driving an ice cream truck.
Would you play the tunes?
Absolutely.
I love it. What advice would you give to your younger self?
Buy Apple.
And you're not talking about the fruit either.
I'm not. I'm talking about the stock. Buy Apple, Tesla, and Microsoft. That's what I would tell my younger self.
Yeah, it'd be nice. Who inspires you most?
My son.
Your daughter might not like that if she heard it, though.
She inspires me to do different things.
Was there a particularly dark day that turned into a positive, and what was the lesson?
Oh, gosh. Was there a particularly dark day, and what was the lesson? You know, I've been really fortunate. I haven't had tremendous dark days. I do remember that there was a particular time where I was in a confrontation with someone, a legal confrontation with someone. And because of that, I had to come up with the funds in order to do that. And I won the confrontation, and I'd already had the funds. So I I ended up with a bunch of dough without meaning to, through something that was a hard time for me, for sure.
Oh, good on you. That's really great. Then what does your ideal date consist of?
Oh, my ideal date, to be fair, I have it all the time. My wife and I, we take our dogs down here in Manhattan Beach and we walk along the Strand. And then on the way back, she gets a piece of pizza and I get a meatball sub and a beer. And we sit and we watch the sunset and then we go home. Like, that's what we do. I love it.
That's so lovely. How lovely. I can see that now. This is a bit of an Irish twist on this. If you had a roast dinner, which in Ireland would be like a roast potatoes, carrots, some kind of protein, whether it's chicken or beef, or like a nut loaf or something like that, and maybe some stuffing. Would you eat your favorite thing first, your favorite thing last, or a little bit of everything together?
A little bit of everything together.
Yes. Boom. Correct answer. Book that you like to gift the most?
So I have a couple. Believe it or not, one is called Open. It's the biography of Andre Agassi. I'm a huge biography person, and it's one of the best biographies I've ever read. Also, the biography Blue of Steve Aoki. He's a personal friend of mine, and his book was really, really interesting, fun read. I give those away on occasion. And also, what's the other one? The Power of Now by Eckhart Tolle. Yeah, he's pretty amazing.
Amazing. I have that on audiobook as well. And his voice is just so distinct.
I know, it's crazy.
Yeah. There's one person in the background. He's obviously at a seminar, speaking at a seminar for some of it. But there's one person that has this really, really loud, obnoxious laugh.
Oh, no.
And it used to really annoy me in the beginning. And now I'm like waiting for the laugh.
Exactly.
Very good. What is your favorite quote, would you say?
Oh, my favorite quote, you never lose, you learn.
Oh, nice. And then if you could have 3 people, past or with us still, for dinner, who would you choose?
My grandmother. Gonna get a little emotional. My grandmother. One of the dogs that passed. Who else? I think it would actually be just those 2.
Yeah. Michael, James interviewed me earlier on for his
did he?
podcast, and he asked me the same question. I said my grandmother, and I burst into tears. So just thank you for sharing your vulnerability with us. I really appreciate that. You know, one of the things that we haven't spoken about, because what you do is already it has all of its own merit, that I didn't need to say this, but I'm going to say it because it it does bring some gravitas. You've worked with some of the most famous people around the world. Like,
I have.
Dr. Oz, you've been on the show over 40 times.
Yep.
Montel Williams, you mentioned earlier on.
Yep.
Tony Robbins, you were on stage with.
I was.
He was the person that I was at one of his seminars, and he asked me what I was grateful for. That's the day that I decided that I was going to make myself happy, and I turned everything around.
Amazing.
Like bow down.
He's an interesting person. You know, I went to Unleash the Power because I got to speak at Unleash the Power, which was kind of crazy. What was cool about it was he practices exactly what he preaches. Like, he's the real deal. Like, I walked on fire for him. Like, no shit. He was unbelievable. It's a good cult. That's what I can say. I don't want to use the word cult because I really don't think it's a cult, but it's like a great place to learn a lot about yourself.
Yeah. Yeah, it really is. Well, your work speaks for itself.
Thanks.
Yeah, without anything else. It is so great to have you on.
Thanks for having me. It was fun.
So much for your time.
I know,
and for sharing with us.
Hit me with that question at the end. Oh my gosh.
I know, it was a good one, wasn't it?
It was a good one.
But you showed up.
I'm okay with it.
You showed up. Where can people find you?
I'm super easy to find, thesleepdoctor.com. We talked a lot about snoring, so you can do /snoring. I actually have a snoring quiz if people want to check that out, but that'd be the best place. Or if you want to learn your chronotype, go to chronoquiz.com.
Amazing. Thank you for being on the Talk Healing to Me podcast.
Thanks for having me.
Great.
Hey, everybody. This is Dr. Michael Breus, the Sleep Doctor, and thanks for listening to me on Talk Healing with me.
Thank you to our sponsors of this episode. You can visit getcleanboss.com/Karen. And also a thank you to our video and podcast producer and editor, Aoife McNamara at Imagine Media. Thank you. Thanks for tuning in to Talk Healing to Me podcast. Sometimes the right piece of info can totally change someone's health journey. So if today's episode resonated with you, please pass it along to someone who might find it useful. And hey, if you enjoyed it, don't forget to like, subscribe, and perhaps even leave a review. It helps more people find us, and I'd love to hear what you think. See you next time, and until then, keep healing, keep growing, and keep listening.